MDOT presents the Extra Mile Podcast, Legislative Session.
Welcome in to another edition of the Extra Mile Podcast Legislative Session. I am Paul Catul, and I'm joined as always by my co-host, Will Kraft. And Will, so far in this series, we've had state legislatures, we've had statewide elected officials, and today we're taking things to the next level. We are going to the federal level. Today we have Congressman Michael Guest in studio with us today. He's U.S. Representative for Mississippi's 3rd Congressional District. I'll give you a little bit of information on Congressman Guest. He assumed office in January of 2019, and prior to his election to the U.S. House, he served as district attorney in Madison and Rankin counties. Congressman Guest, I know you didn't come to Mississippi just to be on this podcast, but you nonetheless have the title of the furthest guest to travel here to be with us. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Well, gentlemen, thank y'all for having me. Look forward to visiting with y'all on issues that affect transportation and really just issues about our state. So we'll really appreciate y'all inviting me on, and glad I was home from D.C. this week to have a chance to join you.
That's right. We're very happy to have you. Get started here. Just get to know you a little bit. Tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're from, where you grew up, where your hometown is, where you live now.
Grew up here in the metro area. Ended up graduating from Brandon High School. And after graduating from Brandon, ended up at Mississippi State University. And as I was entering my senior year, my parents sat down and had a very real conversation with me, which is, hey, you're about to graduate. And once you graduate, what are you going to do with your life? And like most people in college, I had not thought that far ahead. And so my parents encouraged me to either consider law school or grad school. So I sat for the LSAT, made well enough on the LSAT between that and my undergrad GPA to be admitted into the University of Mississippi, or Ole Miss. So tell everyone I'm politically correct, that I have my two major fan bases covered, Mississippi State undergrad, Ole Miss law degree. Again, I know you're a Southern Miss to the top guy, and so I need to find some degree that I can, maybe some online coursework I could do down at Southern, so that I can add some sort of degree from Southern Miss to the repertoire. But went to law school, and in my last semester of law school, I lacked 6 hours of course credit from graduating, and so decided that I was going to move back home to Brandon and do an internship for those last 6 hours that I needed to complete my coursework. And I did an internship in the local DA's office. Rankin-Madison DA's office was where I did that internship, and worked for a guy by the name of John Kitchens. He was DA at the time. John probably most well known for the fact that he tried the Pearl High School shooting case, Luke Woodham. If you remember that case from the late 90s. Luke Woodham killed his mother, then went to Pearl High School. He shot and killed Christina Midifee and Lydia Dew, as well as injuring 6 other students with gunfire that day before he was captured. And really that was kind of when we were kind of seeing our very first run of school shootings. You had Paducah, Kentucky, you had Pearl High School, and then you ultimately had Columbine, Colorado. And so that was a case that John prosecuted. He was a DA and was able to take those cases to trial and get convictions. So, I was able to kind of start off working for someone who I highly respected. Sure. And so I did that. My internship comes to an end after about 4 months, and I believe that the good Lord works in mysterious ways, and He opens doors and He closes doors. And so I was to the point that now that I'd graduated, was going to have to sit for the bar examination. My grades were not good enough that I was going to be able to obtain a job just based on my scholastic work alone. And so I went to John and I said, look, I would like to continue to work here part-time while I take the bar. And we had a lady in our office who was about to go on maternity leave, and I said, look, I can keep her course or her caseload up. I couldn't go in the courtroom and try cases. I couldn't go in there and actually do the pleas before the judges, but I could do a lot of the run-of-the-mill stuff that needs to be done. And so when she came back, then things would be in fairly regular order. So John agreed to let me do that. So I studied for the bar at night, worked in the DA's office during the day. And right about the time she comes back from maternity leave, I get my bar results back, and I've passed the bar.
All right.
So I go back to John a second time, and I say, look, I've been here now, because now we're into the fall. I've been here almost a year. I've kind of done my best to show them that, look, I'm willing to work hard, do whatever needs to be done. And so I go to John and say, look, I've passed the bar. Would you consider hiring me? And he says, well, I would like to, but I don't have a position available. And, being government and limited funding and limited space, so I asked John, I said, if I can find some funding, would you use that to pay my salary? And he told me that he would. And so I began a very brief lobbying career in the fact that I lobbied the local Board of Supervisors. And the fact that I grew up in Brandon, I knew several members on the Board of Supervisors. I'd gone to church went to church with a couple of them. And growing up, I was one of these kids who always had a job. And so, one of my jobs in high school is I worked for the Parks and Rec Department in the city of Brandon, cutting grass, lining baseball fields, picking up trash. I delivered Meals on Wheels for the county.
Oh, wow.
And so most of the people there on the board had some knowledge of me either directly or indirectly. And so I lobbied the board. I would tell you it's a good thing that I did not move into a lobbying career, because while I was successful, it was only very minutely successful. I was able to get a $24,000 increase in the DA's budget, for which John applied that toward my salary. And so I start out, working in the DA's office, making $24,000 a year. I could only afford to do that because I was single, not having a wife, not having a kid, living at home with my parents, which again was not something I'm sure they were overly excited about, their 25-year-old son moving back in with them. But they were kind enough to allow me to do that. And then from there was able to move kind of from an entry-level position, staff attorney, assistant district attorney, and then actually ran for DA. So I had been in the DA's office about a dozen years. Felt that I thought that the office was something that I really would like to pursue as far as being the elected DA. Was fortunate to be elected, and then served 3 terms as DA, and that was the DA for Madison and Rankin County. It was a great honor to be able to work with the men and women of law enforcement, to be able to work with the victims of crime, to go in the courtroom and to advocate on behalf of law and order. Had a great staff during the entire time that I was there, and really had no plans to ever leave the DA's office. I thought I was going to be one of these old prosecutors who would retire at 65 or 70 from the DA's office, just kind of ride off into the sunset. But had an opportunity that presented itself. Greg Harper, who was in this seat before me, Greg and I were friends. He's from also from Rankin County. He's from Pearl. I'm from Brandon. We are both attorneys. He was a municipal prosecutor for the city of Richland and Brandon, and when I was DA and assistant DA. And then we served together on some different community organizations. And so when Greg was in office, he approached me one day and said, hey, have you ever thought about maybe running for Congress? And I really said, truthfully, no. I've never really thought about any other office. Pretty happy where I am. And he said, basically, I'm not going to be here forever. I would like to see somebody good who might have an interest in the job. And your name came up to me and just wanted to kind of plant that seed. And I basically said, well, Greg, thank you for considering me, but not interested. But it's one of those things that I just couldn't shake. Over the next couple of days, I kept coming back to that conversation in my mind. And I said, well, look, I know how I can nip this in the bud pretty quick. I'm just going to talk to my wife about it.
There you go.
And I'm sure she's going to tell me that that's the stupidest idea that she's ever heard, and why would I want to do that? And so I had a conversation with her, which went surprisingly different than I thought. And she said, I think it's something that you should think about, that you should pray about, that you should talk to people about. And so I started doing that. I started making inquiries from people in the community about the job itself, about my potential electability for that job. We spent some time in prayer together and just kind of came to a peace that, hey, if Greg doesn't run again, at that time he was being considered for a Senate appointment. If any of those things happen, then that's going to be the sign that we know that we should take that next step. And Greg ultimately decided not to run again. He wanted to spend more time with his family, come back home. He was fixing to be a grandfather. Now he's a grandfather times two, so he's wanting to spend more time with both of his grandchildren. And so we decided to run, and we're successful, and currently in our second term right now, and have just really enjoyed representing the people of Mississippi in our nation's capital.
I know you're in D.C., you're advocating for Mississippians on transportation and other topics. So how do you personally kind of ensure that Mississippi has a dog in the fight, and that we have a fair piece of the puzzle up there in D.C.?
One of the things we try to do is identify those issues that are important to Mississippi, particularly, important to our district. We think of things such as, infrastructure, how important, roads, bridges, water, sewage. You can even expand that out to rail and ports and things of that nature are. We think of agriculture and how agriculture, is our predominant leading industry in Mississippi.
Right.
You think of things such as telehealth and how important that is in a rural state like Mississippi. So we reach out to stakeholders. I'm routinely having meetings with state legislators, with members of the boards of supervisors, with mayors, business leaders, community leaders, and we're trying to identify the issues that are important in those communities. And generally, those issues are the same, but it can also vary if you're talking from an urban area such as the city of Jackson. That may differ from a very more rural area. And so,
your district is very spread, right?
Yeah. So the district encompasses 20 plus counties. We're still waiting for the final maps as to what the new district will look like. Waiting for the court to weigh in. But again, you'll go from the city of Jackson to somewhere right now, such as Wilkinson County. And so rural Wilkinson County versus urban Jackson, Mississippi, those needs are going to be different.
Right.
But again, you're also going to find that there are needs that are going to be consistent across the district. And so, and the other thing we do is we work very closely with the other members of the delegation. Again, both Trent Kelly, Stephen Palazzo, and Benny Thompson, we work very well with Congressman Thompson on Mississippi-specific issues, maybe not always national issue, but on Mississippi-specific, and then both of our senators. And it's important when you have a small delegation, when you 4 members of the House, and then you add the 2 senators in. So our entire delegation is 6 members. So it's important that we are working together on things that we have both a House and a Senate buy-in as we're looking to either push legislation or as we're asking the administration to trying to influence the policy of the administration, being by the rulemaking policy or something of that nature.
When you mentioned, legislation and serving on so many different committees like you do, how do they play hand in hand where you can kind of, one committee piggybacks off the other, or do you find yourself totally different topics and arenas going from one to the other?
The committees that I have the opportunity to serve on, Homeland Security, I've been able to serve on that. This is my second term on Homeland Security. And so Homeland, you're talking about some of the issues that you see more, maybe some more news stories on, as far as the border and crime and Homeland Security includes national security. So those are things that can be very specific. But there can also be some crossover with my other committee, which is transportation infrastructure. And so when you talk about transportation infrastructure, you think of things, roads, bridges, water, sewage, ports, rails, but both committees, being Homeland and transportation infrastructure, also have oversight of FEMA. They both have oversight of the Coast Guard, because the Coast Guard has both a civilian role and a Homeland Security role. And so you will find that there are areas of overlap that you probably wouldn't normally think about, but again, there's also some very specific areas. T&I has nothing to do with border security and the immigrants coming across, just as Homeland would have nothing to do with, say, electric vehicles or automated vehicles, those sorts of things. And so that's been one of the great things, is to be able to sit in many of these hearings things, to learn about things that, that I had a little bit of knowledge on, but to learn more in depth about things,
Sure.
particularly things that are coming. When you start talking about automated vehicles and the possibility of one day us being able to sit in a car and that car drive us to wherever we want to go, and us not even have to be behind the wheel. And we've got right now we've got vehicles which have, in sense that you can put them on autopilot driving down the
crazy.
interstate. Yeah, but they're talking about that next generation where you just tell the vehicle where to go and then it drives you there. And so some of the potential technological advances and things that we're seeing to kind of get to be there and listen to some of these people about the vision of what our transportation or what our nation is going to look like 5, 10, 15, 20 years down the road. It's just an amazing opportunity.
Just to touch specifically on the EVs and autonomous, I don't know if you got a chance to watch the Super Bowl this past weekend. I know plenty of our listeners out there I'm sure did, but I noticed several back-to-back seemed like commercials relating to EVs, folks rolling out these new models. There was definitely an appetite to show folks that, hey, there's going to be some Chevrolets and some F-150s coming out that are EV in the future. It's just crazy to think about, but it's coming.
It is, and I think particularly when you get into your urban areas, your electric vehicles are going to be something that more people are going to have an interest in. I think in rural America, in rural Mississippi, because of the distance that we have to travel,
Sure.
I think we're always going to have the need for the internal combustion engine, and that's really our economy has been built upon that.
Right.
Really since Henry Ford rolled those cars out on the assembly line. But I do think that there is a component piece for electrical vehicles,
Sure.
but we need to also understand, look, we're going to need, at least in the foreseeable future, we're going to need the internal combustion engine that we've relied on so much. And so to kind of see how that's going to play out, see how that balance is going to come into play. And again, the advances in technology, I think, are going to bring electrical vehicles into service more quickly, and you're going to see those vehicles become more efficient, and you're going to be able to get a longer mileage out of each charge as those vehicles are on the road. And so that is kind of what we're seeing as the direction. It's going to take some time. We're not going to immediately overnight transition to an electric vehicle fleet, but I think you're going to see the prices come down, and that is going to be an option for many people in the next several years as they're looking at buying a new automobile.
I agree. Certainly so.
Let's talk about the infrastructure bill a little bit. I know that the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act is recently passed, and so can you give us your thoughts on that, and just give us a little insight.
The infrastructure bill did pass. It has been signed by the president. Mississippi is going to receive about $3.5 billion when it's all said and done, money specifically for Mississippi. Much of that's road. Some of that's also some bridge money.
Sure.
There's also some funding in there to expand rural broadband, also some funding in there for wildfire prevention and things like that. And so, I think that anytime we're looking at infrastructure, you've got to look at three components. There's going to have to be federal, and then state, and then local. And so as we're looking at what can we do to improve our infrastructure, whether that improvement be building new roads or in some cases just maintaining the roads that we have, any time that you're able to for those organizations to work together to make that happen, I think that's where it's best. The thing that I do like about the infrastructure funding is that money is not necessarily being dictated from Washington, D.C. as to which programs are being funded. That money is being sent down and where the Mississippi Department of Transportation and some of your local elected officials are going to make those decisions. I believe that there really is no one-size-fits-all model, and I believe that local oversight is best. The last thing you want is some bureaucrat in Washington, D.C. trying to dictate what projects get funded from that money. And so the thing that I do like about it is it does have that ability for local officials to be able to help manage the spending of those funds. There's also things in there which it would work to hopefully, improve our ports. When people think about transportation, they only generally think of roads and bridges.
Sure,
We don't
right.
think of things such as rail. And while we have very little, if almost no passenger rail, we've got a great deal of freight rail that runs through Mississippi.
Absolutely.
You've got the Mississippi River, so you've got a major waterway that is being used to ship goods north and south. You've got the Deepwater Port in Gulfport there, and so Mississippi just has a wealth of transportation opportunities. And look, we know that infrastructure is really the backbone of commerce. Whether you're talking about our farmers who are out creating product, they've got to be able to get that product to market. Whether you be talking about Nissan or Toyota or Continental Tire or Yokohama Tire, they are producing products that are produced in Mississippi every day that are shipped not only across the country but across the globe.
That's right.
And you've got to be able to have the infrastructure to deliver that product. And so with good infrastructure, with which rural broadband and high-speed internet, which I think is becoming almost as important in some businesses as the roads and bridges that connect that, you're going to see, I believe, economic development in Mississippi. You're going to see more of these major manufacturers look at Mississippi about either relocating a facility here or expanding an existing facility. I know Nissan has some exciting things that they are looking at doing and probably rolling out soon. Again, you look at Continental Tire and the size of that facility and the investment, and so you look at the investment that Nissan, Toyota, Yokohama, Continental Tire has put in Mississippi. I mean, it's just truly amazing, and so we've got to have that infrastructure so that as we are building those products, that we can get those products to market.
And the job creation that comes along with those companies, coming in, it's just, certainly a blessing.
That's right, and when you have a major manufacturer, a lot of times you'll have some of their suppliers who will be building facilities adjacent there so that they can supply the raw products that they need to manufacture. So, so it's not just the initial employer or producer that's coming. You're right. There's going to be additional suppliers that generally will relocate next to a major facility. The jobs that are created, with that, some of the tax revenue that the state and the local county and cities are able to use to again put back into needed things such as schools and infrastructure products. So that's something again that I think our state has done a good job with, and I think that we're going to be very well positioned going forward.
Congressman, I know Will's got a fun question for you coming up. I want to ask you one more thing about broadband expansion, maybe a little more insight into that. I know expanding rural broadband is a big deal these days, and can you kind of give us an update on that, how that's going and the importance of rural broadband expansion?
Yeah, Mississippi was fortunate in that some of the stimulus packages that were passed during COVID, there was money that was designated for expansion of broadband. And we particularly saw during COVID the importance of broadband. I think prior to COVID, I think a lot of people wanted high-speed internet maybe so that they could watch Netflix quicker and maybe they wouldn't have the circle going around as things were loading. But when COVID hit and people were having then to do more from home, we saw people who were working from home, people who were traditionally going into an office working from home. Many of our students weren't able to go into the classroom, and so they were being educated from home. We know that people routinely shop from home. Again, during COVID, we saw some people who were worshiping from home. They were live streaming their church services instead of going in there to church for those services. And then, telehealth. People were actually being able to see their doctor remotely from their home. And so with that, I think that we saw the need to very quickly expand high-speed internet, not just to your urban areas, but throughout the state. And so there was funding that was included in a couple of the stimulus packages. Mississippi was able to make use of some of that money. They also included some state money with that federal money to make those dollars go further. There was also some partnerships, some government-private partnerships where you had some of the rural co-ops and others who were putting in money in addition to that. we've recently authored a bill called the E-Bridge, which would provide some additional funding for states like Mississippi, rural states that have a large number of individuals who don't have access to high-speed internet. And so we understand the importance of high-speed internet, and we also understand the importance of telehealth. Again, Mississippi is blessed that UMC is a telehealth center of excellence, one of, I think, only 3 or 4 in the entire country. And so we are, as it relates to telehealth in Mississippi, we are truly on the cutting edge of that. And so for us to be able to, promote legislation to that effect, to be able to help expand broadband, to help make sure that we are making sure that telemedicine is available to all those that need it, those are things that I think are very important to our state.
No doubt.
And that's legislation that I've been proud to be a part of. But I also want to talk very briefly about a piece of legislation that I'm proud of, that it really, on the national stage, national impact is very minimal, but it had a very local impact. And so some of the legislation we work on is very impactful across the globe. You think of some of our foreign policy legislation. You also think about, as we're creating spending bills and things of that nature, it has an impact there just here in the United States. But then we can also get to some very specific local legislation. And I had the opportunity last Congress to work along with Cindy Hyde-Smith to be able to rename a post office in Brookhaven, Mississippi after 3 fallen officers. And with my prior background as a prosecutor, and working with law enforcement, I really consider our law enforcement to be our modern-day heroes. Those are the people day in and day out who are putting themselves in harm's way to protect people they don't know. And so we had 3 officers who were shot and killed in Lincoln County over 2 different instances. You had Deputy Donald William Durr, Corporal Zach Moak, and Patrolman James White. And so we wanted to see what we could do to honor those individuals, to honor their sacrifice for their community. And so we worked along with Senator Cindy Hyde-Smith to rename the post office there in Brookhaven after these 3 officers. And it was very impactful to the families. And so as you're meeting with these families, and for the families to say, hey, we've got elected officials, both state and local, who still remember the sacrifice of our loved ones, and to be there with those family members when that plaque was unveiled and that post office was renamed from them, was something that was truly special to me. And so, again, some of the legislation that we deal with is very impactful just on a local level, such as this post office renaming bill, and then some of the others relates directly to Mississippi, and then some of the nation, and then some more internationally. And so that's one of the great things about the job, is when you show up each and every day, you're dealing with something different, but it does have a direct impact on the people of Mississippi in some shape, form, or fashion.
And we've got a simple one for you. How can your constituents contact you in your office?
The easiest thing is, the power of Google. Just Google. You'll have all of our contact information as far as phone numbers, offices. We've got an office in Washington, D.C. We also have our main office here in the district is in Brandon on Highway 80. We've got an office in Starkville, and we've got an office in Meridian. So we have physical offices in 3 cities in the district. And then, we're always available by phone, email. And that's one thing that I want to make sure, but before we go very quickly, is, one of the things that we do is we always focus, or a lot of times focus, on what are we doing in Washington, what are we doing legislatively, what are we doing messaging-wise. But we have a great group of employees who work on constituent service issues. And so if you have a problem, you're a veteran and you're having a problem with the VA, if you're having trouble getting a passport, if, those sorts of things. And sometimes, those issues are very big. I'll give you 2 quick examples. One is we had some missionaries who came back. They had been overseas in the Caribbean doing some missionary work. They had identified a young lady who needed to come to the United States for some medical treatment. Was not a U.S. citizen, but was unable to get the medical treatment she needed in her home country. And these missionaries were from Mississippi. They asked, could we help? And so we were able to partner with actually Senator Rubio's office in Florida to help cut through some red tape to get this young lady into the United States for that needed medical treatment.
That's awesome.
And we were able to do that and do that in a timely fashion. And so sometimes it can be life issues like that, kind of almost life or death. But one story I'm most proud of is I had a veteran come up to me at a VFW event, so Veteran of Foreign Wars event, came in and had never met this man before, and he comes up and he said, you're Michael Guest. And I said, yes, sir. What's your name? And he told me his name, and he said, I just want to thank you. Your office helped me with a situation that I had. And I said, well, do you mind sharing that with me? And so he reached into his coat pocket, he pulled out a pair of eyeglasses and he put them on. And he said, what do you notice about my glasses? And I said, well, you're missing a lens on the right-hand side. He folded them up, put them back, reached into his other pocket and he pulled a pair of glasses out and he put those on. And he said, I'm a veteran. He said, I had been trying to get a new pair of glasses from the VA for 3 months. Was unsuccessful in doing that. I contacted your office, and in 3 days, I was able to get this new pair of eyeglasses. And so, it touched my heart that we were able to help a veteran. To that veteran, that was probably as important as anything that was going on in Washington, D.C. that week. But for him to know that he could access his congressional office and that we would work to try to help resolve his issues meant the world to him. And it was something that my office does every day. And so I didn't know the story. I was not directly involved in that. I quickly went and found out, who helped this veteran and was able to share that story. But those are some of the things that we can offer. And so, feel free, and I encourage your listeners, if there are issues that they are having with the federal government where they feel like that they've just reached a dead end, and that nothing is happening, nothing is moving, please contact us and let us see if there's some way that we can break that logjam, some way to make sure that we're shining a case, our light on their particular case to make sure that their grievances are being addressed wherever possible.
That's great info. Yeah.
Thank you. Congressman Guest, thank you so much for coming in to join us today. We really appreciate you making time for us. To our listeners out there, thank you for listening. If you want to hear more episodes of the Extra Mile Legislative Podcast, be sure to subscribe or download wherever podcasts can be found. You can also now watch each episode of the Extra Mile. Just search Mississippi Department of Transportation on YouTube. Remember to follow us on Facebook and Twitter. That handle is @MississippiDOT. And as always, remember to drive smart out there on Mississippi highways.